Hello, welcome everybody. Week's Everyday Inclusion and Belonging LinkedIn Live. Really glad to have you all here. Thrilled to have Steph Douglas, VP of People at Vungle, with us. Before we jump in and talk about what Steph and the team there are doing, I've got to do a little public service announcement. It is the day to whichever side of the aisle you're on, wherever your policy issues lie, get out there, exercise your right to vote. Here's a little fun fact from history. In 1872, suffragist Susan B. Anthony was arrested because she broke the law. She went and she voted, and she was put in jail for having that right to vote. So don't take it for granted, whether it's a school board election, local ballot issues, whether you are choosing representatives, whatever it might be. Every election matters. Your vote counts. Get out there and vote. So, okay, now we can talk about everyday inclusion. Steph and I don't know if you saw that, she just put her I voted sticker up. And y'all should know this about Steph. She takes great pride in being the very first person at her polling place every election. And in fact, the polling officials know her. So you've already voted today.
Absolutely. Yes, I do take great pride in being there first. I think they think I'm a little nuts, but there's something really cool about being the first person to vote in your district. So.
Absolutely. Well, so let's do this, Steph. I know that you've had a deep commitment. You've been doing human resources, people work for your career. And I know for you personally, it's always been a core value and a way that you lead in terms of making sure that everybody's got a voice, making sure that that cultures are really supportive, bringing their individual and authentic selves to work. I'd love to hear what y'all are doing at Vungle. First, tell people kind of what Vungle is and what your demographics are, because I think all of that is really fascinating.
Thanks. Yeah, it is. It's certainly an area of passion for me. And over the last couple decades of looking at what we can do as organizations has really shifted. Early on, I believe a lot of us were very active in building the diversity space. But without making it a space that people want to stay and have a sense of belonging, it almost doesn't matter. So a lot of the work now is, once you build that diversity, of creating a place where people come as they are. So we're in ad tech. So Techie Tech, we're based out of San Francisco. And I think a lot of people have a really strong idea of what that demographic is going to look like. And there's some truth to that, the kinds of people who are drawn to this industry. But we do have offices around the world. And in our offices of 250 people, about half of them are here in San Francisco, we have over 30 nationalities, and that's pretty exciting. And of those 30 nationalities, we have over 60 languages spoken in our offices. So when we talk about a diverse workspace, you're literally walking through a space where people come from different places in the world, different socioeconomic places. We're very careful at looking at a wide breadth of schools when we recruit, so we don't limit things that way. And you hear different people talking in different languages and different accents and celebrating different things in their culture. And so creating a place where you can have that be real and organic is incredibly important, because that will attract more people that can be comfortable in your space.
So y'all started with diversity, right? You started with, and it's like, you can bring in the diversity, but if everybody has to show up and behave the same way, you're not leveraging the beautiful things that diversity brings, inclusive. So you started with diversity. I'd love to hear just some of the things that you've done, because I don't know of a much more diverse people than y'all have at Vungle. And so I'd love to hear that. And then let's talk about, okay, you brought the diversity in, now what are you doing to create the inclusion? But I'd love a couple of tips, because not many people, not many organizations have been able to pull off what you all have with that commitment to bringing in diversity. So I heard a couple of things, like you're different, looking at different schools. What are some other things that you've done?
Well, I think one of the really important things in this cycle, because there's things you do throughout this cycle, is in your recruiting cycle is doing a lot of training around understanding our unconscious bias and removing that bias from an interview process. And Maureen, you've come here and done trainings for my team, so we've got great stuff we've done there. And there are the real table stakes. You need to look at your job descriptions and make sure that they are open inclusive. So there's not language that would be less appealing to a certain demographic or draw in only a certain demographic. You need to make sure that you are interviewing for the skill set of a job. This may sound just like, well, of course you do that, except for a lot of people don't. They are looking for people they want to hang out with. And so that means that if I meet you and you went to the same school as I did, and we're kind of have the same socioeconomic status and we kind of look the same, I'm going to have this natural connection, and it's going to move an interview in a different direction than if we don't have those things in common. So really removing that from the interview process and saying, we are going to interview for the skills needed for that job. And we're going to define that very carefully. And so for those of you who are thinking, well, whoa, what about my culture? I want my culture. That's important too. You need to make sure, though, that your culture is built on a set of values that can be values for any kind of people. So if your culture is about having fun and playing sports, you're going to obviously alienate a lot of people. You can have all those things, but if your culture is built on a set of values of communicating respectfully, and you do a lot of training around that's a healthy culture. That's something that you want to build. So again, removing that bias from the interview process is the first place that we start, because that kind of blooms out into how we treat our review process and how we interact with each other. And we do a lot of training around that.
And I love this idea of not saying, I'm not trying to find somebody that I want to hang out with, like removing that like me bias. And the other piece, I love this idea of culture add versus culture fit.
Yeah.
And a culture, right? And a culture add is still true to your values. So I think the work and the time that y'all have spent defining those and making sure that those are really, even those core values can lead to inclusivity is a really key. All that foundational work that you've done in the diverse talent. Now let's talk about inclusion and belonging. I happen to be at your offices, and I think it was Chinese New Year. I'm trying to remember what holiday
that would have been
and there was a yeah. So like, I know that's one little thing, but I know you all do everything from celebrations and food and acknowledgement. And I'm going to be quiet and let you talk about all the great.
Yeah, one of the neat things is when you start to remove all that bias and you bring people in for the right reasons and you have good value set, that wanting to hang out together actually does happen with everybody. And that's a neat thing. And part of it is celebrating differences. So it's the fun stuff, like celebrating Chinese New Year's or celebrating Diwali as an office, but letting it be organic, not making it a kind of forced weird thing, but saying, people who are excited about it and giving them the space to celebrate those things and share them really comfortably with different people, and opening the space for people to ask questions about it. I don't understand this holiday. What does it mean? Why is it important? It's making sure we do serve lunch here a couple times a week, and it's making sure that the food that is served each time is something that everybody can eat. There's options for everybody, but also that we are serving all kinds of different foods from around the world, because people in this office come from all over the world and eat all kinds of foods. So making sure that just in a day-to-day, it normalizes that, you're going to have all kinds of different foods from all over the world here on a regular basis. It is things maybe like looking at when people are going through fasting. So certainly a lot of people from different cultures have periods of the year where they fast during the year. So how do you create a space where people understand that that's happening and support them through it? So there's so many really neat ways of doing that. And then, there's things like the fun clubs that we have that attract all different people. One of the women who works for me, Jade, who's amazing, who you've met, Maureen, sponsors the D&D club, and you walk in there and it's all these different people from all different places, and they have this connection around that. But a lot of it also comes to learning how to use language well, so it's inclusive on a regular basis, being in a safe environment to say, hey, that did offend me, or hey, I have a question about that. So those things, the more you build on them and you get more comfortable having those conversations, the more inclusive an environment becomes.
I heard two things in there that are critical. One is sort of this allowing for this curiosity. Well, so I actually heard three: a respect for the different angling at this world, right? So, and a respect and allowing the curiosity and like, okay, maybe I don't know what this holiday is, or maybe I don't know why you're fasting. Can you tell me about that? The third thing that I think is really critical is you talked about a safe space to have the conversation. And this, for me, is one of the things that I think is, we go to blame and shame, and we don't allow room for these missteps. We don't allow, and we're actually going to have a whole on this. How have you done that at Vungle? How have you created a place where people can talk about it when somebody says or that's exclusive or makes somebody feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think that's such a hard space because I think people generally want to do the right thing. And I think they generally don't want to hurt their other humans, especially if you're in an environment together. I think that's mostly true. And so if we can give permission to say, hey, that didn't feel okay, or here's why that bothers me, and not make it about shaming someone, but saying, when you say, when you call us the girls, it feels this way to me. And I know you didn't probably mean that in that way, but that's how it's feeling. I do think that a lot of those conversations happen quietly and privately to start. And I think that if you can do training around respectful communication and feedback, which we do a lot of, so there's the giving feedback, but there's also the receiving feedback. And that doesn't mean that everything you feedback on me, I have to agree with or accept, but it should be presented in a respectful manner, and I should be able to hear that it's important to you and be respectful back. And so that goes for any of these things when you're dealing with diversity, bumps, or just, performance issues or any kind of communication. So if you can build that in as normal in an organization where there is a good feedback, and where people can ask questions and where they can make mistakes, I think that's pretty important because we have all blown it. On a pretty regular basis, people blow it. And if it can be okay for you to say, wow, I didn't know that was not okay, or I didn't know that you can't eat that, or that, saying that means this. If we can make that okay, then we can address it.
I think there was a key point in there that you haven't left that to chance. You haven't expected people to have that skill set because, again, in most cultures, we're not raised to be like all up in your grill and telling you what's going on. We're gonna shove this under the rug. And so teaching people as adults this, how to receive, how to present, how to have this as ongoing, like death to the annual performance review already. And instead like having this constant feedback loop, but that you talk about it and you have training. And you provide people with some skills base. There's really, really key because so many organizations just think we're going to get it.
Yeah, they don't. Because it's hard stuff and it's uncomfortable stuff. And again, people don't want to step wrong, but when they do, they don't want to be shamed for it. Obviously, unless something gets to a place where someone does need to be talked to, and that does happen. But I think that a lot of things, people want to do the right thing. And if you give them the tools to ask the questions or to say that felt uncomfortable to me, then you can start to have a dialogue and start to shift your culture.
I think there's a piece that I'm hearing in here, Steph, that's really about this being just like ongoing. That there's not like, oh, we're done, we've done this training, or we take this approach that is just a constant. How have you helped people have in mind, that inclusion is actually a part of my responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, and there's your challenge, right? Because we all get busy with other things. It is never done. We do, the trainings are regular. The conversation is regular. Our value set talks to it, and we really embed that in our conversations. And we use our values as a filter for all decision making at the leadership level, and encourage others to. So for us, it does feel very present, but it doesn't start that way, right? It's something, it's like building a muscle. It's like brushing your teeth every day, which, yeah, hopefully y'all do. But, do you think about it? Do you go, gosh, today or not today? Well, as a 3-year-old, you probably did. But as you build that muscle, it gets more natural. But it's never ending. And also, you have new people come into your world, and you want to train them as they come in, and you want to make sure that, and quite frankly, things change. Again, what we thought was cutting edge around this kind of work 15 years ago would be nothing now. So you do have to evolve with that. And, it's one of the reasons I'm excited about the work that you're doing with everyday inclusion, because it is going to be this constant reminder, and a lot of it's that reminder. So that's why I'm very, very excited about the work that you're doing there too.
Well, we're coming up on time. We've covered a lot of ground. If you just had one or two pieces of advice, or you want to drop some last truth bombs, what would they be, Steph?
Well, I'll tell you this, people say that having a more diverse staff makes your business better. Well, it does. I mean, it absolutely does. And it doesn't mean that things are always going to be easy. I mean, the easiest thing is to sit in a room with everyone just like you and agree with each other. And that's just so boring, and so not creative, and so not interesting. So I would strongly encourage people to do the work of building the environment. And that doesn't mean just like I'm going to hire for diversity and then I'm done, because you're not done. You're starting. So your rewards are going to be amazing. I had a dinner last year at one of the summits, and it was tables of 10. And I was sitting there, and every single person there came from a different country. They had different languages. And it meant that the conversations they're richer and they're more interesting, and we have to work harder to understand each other. And it's really cool. So I strongly encourage people to do the work, and it won't be easy and it won't be fast, but you can do it.
Well, and I love that challenge, reward, payoff, right? It is a challenge, right? You have to, but how interesting. And I love that idea. Like, we could all be the same, and how boring is that?
It's so boring.
So let's leave it with that. Like, if you want to be more creative and more interesting experience at work, do this work. So, Steph, thank you so much for joining us, sharing all your good stuff. If you all are not following Steph, I would. She's always posting really interesting content, ideas, each other now. And I always leave conversations with her with something to think about. So, Steph, thanks for being here, sharing your truth bombs and all the work that y'all are doing at Vungle, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for having me.